is the great one. I read that, I think, in another book recently.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good.
But you're hot on his heels.
Well, I think he really made something new with the Swedish tradition, because he brought in a sort of thriller element with wild characters.
We have a really long tradition of crime writing in Sweden, but before Stig Larsson it was mostly police novels. So
yes, a man sitting in the car driving from A to B to C. That was
Henning Mankell.
yeah.
Well, Henning Mankell was. Oh, there is this sound in the microphones. Henning Mankell was fantastic.
We liked him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, he made also very much. But I know there's a lot of driving in his.
A lot of fast food too.
Yeah.
So you come up with it, Junalina.
Exactly.
Jonah,
yeah.
And Jonah is the name is the same as Jonah in the Bible in the Old Testament, but the Finnish spelling of it.
So he's being tested.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. He's being swallowed by a big fish. Every book is like this big fish swallowing him, and he has to stay there until he solves the mystery and catches the villain.
So the mystery is the whale.
Well, or the book, in a way, because all our books are standalone, so they are meant to be read one by one. But if you read them in a series, you will get the epic story about Jonalina and Saga Bauer.
I'm going to be careful not to give things away, but it's a good entry point for this book, because you do something with Lina, a character you've already created, and you introduce this new element. Was that hard? Or were you building up to it?
That is a very good question, because, I don't know, as a writer, things come to you and they want to be told in a way too.
You explore the destinies of your characters in some way, and you mostly just follow.
Yes, and you need to be fascinated by them.
So how long ago did you know that about his wife and child?
We knew about it almost from start when it came, but we didn't know in detail. We just knew that something had happened. He had made a big sacrifice in his life, and so forth. And we tried to, understand what it was. So it took 4 books.
Well, 6 really, right?
Ooh.
Mine, huh? 6 books.
No, 6 books. Yeah.
4 for America.
Yeah.
Yes. This is the newest here in the U.S. It has never been published here before.
And with Luna, you give us Jurek.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. He is.
He's scary.
Yeah, very scary. I had nightmares every night when we wrote the SANDMAN. I was dreaming that Jurek Walter came after us, punishing us for writing about him.
Well, you bring him to life. You already brought Lars Kepler to life. You could bring Jurek to life.
I know, but I think that's a kind of a sign. We have begun to see, to taking it as a good sign, these nightmares, because I have them every time we write a book. And it started actually with a hypnotist, where we used our own apartment as the model for the hypnotist's
we thought that was
apartment.
a good idea, because then you know where the kitchen is, and the corridor, and the bathroom, and so forth.
Yeah, but actually every night I had to go up and check the door. And finally we had to leave our apartment. We
moved,
we moved. Couldn't live there anymore. So now we have learned our mistake. But in our latest book, actually, we use our neighbor's apartment. It's much better.
Did they move?
No, but he found out. He read the book and he said, "This looks like my apartment." But he was happy.
For those of you who don't know, Jurek is a serial killer of sorts, and he has an enormous amount of influence over his victims, so much so that he's confined in a hospital for the criminally insane. And he's so influential on his victims that the hospital staff wears earplugs, because he can make you do something with a whisper. And he does.
He can manipulate people really, really bad. Yeah.
And so you bring us this story in which you have to get Bauer into the hospital with him.
Right.
Yeah. It's an undercover story. That is the heart of the Sandman in a way.
Yeah, actually we got an idea at a dinner party in the Netherlands where we met a former Mossad agent. He was a secret agent for Mossad, and he told us all about his work. It was a nice evening, but we asked maybe too many questions. But it gave us an idea to write an undercover story. So the Sandman is basically an undercover story where Special Agent Saga Bauer, she's posing as a patient in the same ward as this serial killer Jurek Walter.
Now I wanted to ask a little bit about the ward, because you create a really claustrophobic sense. But even more than that, this guy is secretly imprisoned in a secret setting, and I know we have renditions we talk about here, but we don't. Our justice system is different. I don't know how. Does that really happen in Sweden? Do they have these secret hearings where they move people?
Well, then they wouldn't be secret.
But somehow you got there.
Yeah. Actually, this place that we write about, it exists for real. But now we have, since Jurek Walter, he is a fictional villain, so we have put him in this fictional cell. We really do that when we research. We do very much research because authenticity is so important in these books.
And we did a lot about serial killers, of course, and focused on the intelligent ones, the ones with strategies, and the one who communicated, because that's interesting. And then we kind of interlaced it with our own fears. That's how it works for us.
You fear being buried alive in the fall.
Yeah, that would be really.
I was struck, at least with the idea that you were following or paying homage to the Silence of the Lambs. The woman, the serial killer, the time clock, all of that. How much of that was an influence on this book, if any?
It's a great story, The Silence of the Lamb. We really loved it when we saw it many years ago.
But we didn't discuss it during the process at all. I think we just had it like an inspiration together with other kind of inspiration.
Yeah, and I think we really wanted, as you said, we used our deepest fear and research to create this villain, and that was Jurek Walter. We never reflected of any other. Of course, everything is full of references, and where the stories come from, I don't know. It's the fruit of our imaginations and everything we experience and see and read and so forth, of course. But I really loved Silence of the Lamb. That's
and the Lecter is a great villain.
Yeah.
And Hannibal is a guy you kind of, I call him an anti-hero. You kind of like him. He becomes your deviant pal. But nobody's going to like Jurek. He's a bad guy.
He is very scary. Yes. I remember we met a journalist once who said he'd rather have Hannibal Lecter as babysitter for his children than meeting Jurek Walter. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, me too, actually.
They're volunteering to be babysat right now. When you were dealing with this very disturbing person, you had him steal people from their home, from their lives, apparently randomly. What was the inspiration for that?
But I think it is our fears, our deepest fears.
As soon as you have children, I think those kind of fears.
To lose the ones you love. That is what he does. He makes you lose the ones you love.
And for us, crime fiction is about handling those kind of fears, because crime fiction is about a journey from chaos to order in some way, and that's why we have to write these kind of books and read them too. I think because in real life you read about real terrifying events and you never get any answers. You never get any order. But in fiction, you can have it. You can handle it in some way.
Yes, and I think also with we have this hero, Jonah Lena, and he's really a great hero. a Finnish Swede, and there are no Finnish heroes in Swedish literature, so that was very important for us to pay homage to the Finns, and we had to have, you know, a really fantastic antagonist to this hero. So I think that it's about balance too. It's like
he shows also the weaknesses of our hero, because our hero are actually afraid of this villain. Yeah.
And in this book, Saga is a real. I mean, talk about hero.
Yeah.
She becomes, I thought, the heart of the book.
Yeah. She's fantastic. She is our female main character, Saga Bauer.
And she's got some issues.
Yeah, she has. She's a very complicated person. And she's also so fascinating to write about.
What makes her fascinating to you?
Well, it's that she has this, I don't know, hidden madness somewhere inside of her. And she's just about to be able to keep it there, hidden.
And she's key in all of your books?
And she appears in our second book. She has a great introduction in our second book. She's fantastic. I love Saga.
Which one was the second book?
It's The Nightmare.
The Nightmare?
Yeah.
Check that, The Nightmare. How is it writing together?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, since we skipped the children's book and the play and started with Lars Kepler.
We call it like a jazz session. We're just jamming. It's great. And the actual process starts, of course, with an idea. But so we share like everything from the first idea to the last sentence. It's great. We have an idea, then we write like hundreds of notes with all the different scenes, structuring the plot. So we hang the notes on a wall, and then we stand in front of that wall, overview the story, and start to discuss and move the pieces of paper around and make new ones. And we continue until we feel that the narrative is complete in some way. And it's a bit disciplined, but we need it, because as soon as we sit in front of our computers, the characters begin to come alive, and nothing can stop them, and then it's good to know your story. And that's magic when that happens. It's the best.
Do you have a character that you write versus a character that you write, or are you constantly shifting?
We are constantly. Actually, we sit side by side, and I write one scene and Alexander another, and then I email my text to Alexander, and he emails back, and then I continue. So we really work inside each other's text and change text all the time.
So many times. So when we finish a book, there's not one single sentence in it, I think, that one of us has written alone.
No, because we want to have one voice, the Kepler voice.
And I think that's the reason why it works so well for us to cooperate now, because we lose in some way control of what we did from start. Which sentence did I write and which did Alexander? We don't know it. So we just concentrate on making the whole novel as good as possible together.
So is one of you always writing ahead of the other or behind?
No, we just like pick
I think
scenes.
parallel. Yeah. So we don't write like linear in that way, but we work on the whole part of the book all of the time. Yeah, so because if we change something in the end, we have to go back, when you knit something and you have to tear it up again and change it.
Our publisher often asks us, when we have written like 9 or 10 months, they say, can we at least read like the first chapter? And we say, no, it's not ready, because
the whole book has to be ready.
In this book, you introduce some interesting concepts. I was fascinated by, we talked a little bit about the hospital setting itself and this idea of secrecy.
Yeah.
But you also go into the secret cities and the Russian space program.
Yes.
How did that evolve? Because that's a fascinating history that not many people know about.
No, I know, and that's the great thing of being a writer, that research can take you to these fantastic
this secret
stories.
Cosmodrome in Leninsk, Kazakhstan.
Can you tell them a little bit about the Leninsk, Kazakhstan city?
Well, it was built, for science, for space science, because it was in the time when Soviet and the USA competed of being the first persons out in space. So they built this big city and they had all these scientists there, and then there was a big explosion, so many people died. And nobody
just
knew.
A secret, no?
Just a secret, yeah.
It's just a Chernobyl of its day.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, actually.
Yes, and that is also with this villain. We never wanted to write about, this is a monster, but we wanted to understand how did he become like this, what happened, and that's why we go back to Russia, to Soviet, to everything.
Yeah, because empathy is, I think, the most important ingredients in all fiction, especially when it comes to crime fiction, because you have to understand and feel for each character, and that goes for even Eric Walter.
Yeah.
But and you do give that empathy, but by the end, he's on his way.
Yeah. We need, to turn the screw, really.
And you do some fascinating things with speed. I really enjoyed the pace of the book. I mean, it is a fast read for 450 pages. You're shifting scenes every 2 pages. I assume that's intentional, that you have a word limit that you hit, and that's it.
No, I think we just have this rhythm that we feel when we write. We never think about that. We just feel the rhythm of the book in a way, and the story.
And we enjoy ourselves to read books which is fast-paced and short chapters, because you can always read another chapter, and it's a great thing.
And it's so fantastic that you just by writing words, people are running, or pushing each other, are frightened, and that is so fantastic.
Why is this book the breakout book for you? Why is the Sandman? Why is it resonating with American audiences and UK audiences?
I think it's a great book to start with, actually, because you have the full story of Jonah Lilna, and you have Saga Bauer in her, in her grandness in a way, and the villain, Yorick Walter. I think the story is a very complete story in a way. It's an undercover story, but it's so much more, as you said, about the secrecy, but it's also about being locked up in your lies, or in your past, or in your sorrow, or in your willing to have revenge. So for me, it's very much a book about being locked up, claustrophobia.
A lot of heart, I think, because you care for the main characters. We did when we wrote it, and we actually, you can't believe it, but we cried tears when we write it. It's crazy, but you are so into your story.
Yeah.
You have to use your own emotions, your own emotional memories and all that. So it's
it's very physical to write to.
Sounds dangerous.
No,
it's especially when I write dialogue, I start to whisper always, and
that's very creepy. That's not nice. It's really creepy.
But I hear them. You can be happy I doesn't speak out loud.
No, I am happy.
You also tackle the issue of Sweden's history of refugees, something that's actually tearing our country apart right now. What is your take on Sweden's history? Obviously, from the book, I take it you're critical of it, and of course, with you talk about Finland it being important to you, and there's that issue too. So a little bit about the history of Sweden.
Yeah.
First, I think these kind of books, crime fiction, they're suited for discussions about society. I think it's a good thing with them. So, of course, because crime is always a failure of society, not only an individual's failure, but also a society.
Yes, and we wanted to create a destiny that showed every person has a destiny, and we can look at the people who are running for their lives and trying to find asylum or refuge.
Right now in Europe, it's a really big issue.
But everybody there is actually running for their lives,
Yeah.
trying to survive with their children.
And in the 50s and 60s, Sweden's answer was to wrest children away from their
Yeah,
parents.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sweden
That
has
was
a
the
very
policy.
hard history of that. If somebody was poor, they could take the children away and put them on auction. Actually, long time ago. So yeah, we wanted to bring up that.
It's a dark story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's dark.
So, but and also we want to say that Georg Walter, he didn't just was born being a monster. Something happened to him. He was deformed by bad things that happened that he couldn't help.
And he channeled it into utter rage.
Yeah, then he made these choices that weren't good at all. So it's not an excuse. Absolutely not. More that in our books we really want to find the answers. And we want the reader to have the answers because we know that we take the reader for this roller coaster ride, but we are going to get back safe. That is very important for us.
I asked Jon Nesbo once if you live in a place where there's a very high satisfaction factor with life. There isn't much crime. What is it with the Scandinavian crime? It's dark as hell, and yet
Maybe it's the winters. I don't know, it's very dark. We just sit there in the darkness. No, but I think you need to be safe in a way to write and read these books because these are universal stories about extreme situations and choices that people have to make, and I think we all need to tell these stories.
But I think you have to be pretty safe in your life, feel safe to dare to and to be able to dig deep in those kind of stories. Because if you live in a war zone, it's
I don't think you need
no.
crime fiction then. I think you need romantic books or something. So, yeah.
and crime right now in Sweden crime writing in Sweden is very hot, as
Yeah.
you say. So you're writing a real wave of popularity.
Yeah, it has been hot for a long time.
It's
Ever
a long
since the
tradition,
70s, we have a really strong tradition in Sweden. And, yeah.
You know, when I wrote the review, I mentioned Wallander or Henning Mankel's books, but I was also thinking, after I wrote it, of course, I was reminded of the Netherlands writer, the police, Jean, and the name is escaped. That's the one.
Van de Vettering, right.
And
Okay.
are you familiar with his books?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I wondered because there is a similarity in your books to that as well. Netherlands.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. We must check it out.
Yeah.
Other than Stieg Larsson, who do you like to read?
Oh, we read a lot.
Yeah.
Of course, our Scandinavian colleagues and a lot of American writers.
Anyone in particular?
Well, right now, yeah, I just read Karen Slaughter, which I like very much.
I just read Lee Child books. So.
Yeah. and we read both. You and I read. It's not really a crime fiction, but it was very good. The Girls by Emma Clyde. I thought that was a great book, actually.
Yeah, this would be a great moment to just revisit a question that I discussed coming in. Some of you may wonder why the earlier books aren't here, because this is actually the fourth one, and the reason is they're not in print at the moment. We can't order them, but you might want to tell us what the prospect is for bringing back the first three.
Absolutely. It's because we changed publishing house to Knopf, and they decided to retranslate the previous books. So they are going to be out this summer. So I think it's great to start with the SANDMAN, and then if you feel like it, read the others, because now we have a very good translator, and we have been working very close to the publishing house editing it, and I feel that this translator is so close to our tone. We are so happy with this.
And I think it's good to have the same tone in all Bookstore. So
Right. I just, well, I didn't want you to think we'd screwed up, but at the same time, I didn't want you to be dismayed that the thought that you couldn't. The Hypnotist was the first one that was published here, anyway. Whether it was the first one,
it was first, yeah.
right? So you will have that opportunity to, and presumably. The digital books are redone as well, so for those of you who don't read print books but prefer to read digital, it'll be the same file will go up. The other comment I wanted to make is that we're talking about Uric and Hannibal Lecter and all, and you might think that there's a tremendous amount of gore and violence and ick factor and so forth in the books, but in truth, one of the reasons they're so scary is that there isn't, and I thought the best thing you did in that regard was that people had to wear earplugs when they went into his holding cell because his voice alone, what he could say, could drive people to extremities of various kinds. Isn't that scarier? Don't you wonder what could he be doing or saying to them that they really had to? Didn't you find that to be really creepy?
I love that aspect of it. And then there's a great place in the book, which it's just terrifying, and it's when Jonah goes to the house of the nurse and opens the door, and you just it's not so much what's in that house as what you think is going to be in that house, and it's
That's right. You know, and that's a really old technique. That's that old Mary Roberts Reinhardt thing. Don't go into the attic. Don't go into the attic. And then always, you know, somebody went into the attic. And the problem is that it was too often an anticlimax when you got into the attic. It wasn't as terrible. But I think that anticipation is a lot scarier than, you know, than the actuality. So I wondered if part of the reason this book is resonating is that for people who don't want to read with a lot of evisceration and so forth made explicit, that you've avoided that, but you still terrify everybody. That's a pretty good power trick for writers. Yeah. Right. Do you want to take questions from the audience?
of course.
Absolutely.
Step back on
Be
the
happy.
Have you ever in your writing process come up with an idea that the other one has said, no, that's too disturbing, we can't do that?
Yeah, we often discuss that because there is some research that we wouldn't like to do because you don't want to have that in your head.
Yeah, it's because research is always about real suffering, real victims, and some kind of research we can't do.
No.
So that's always
So that's what we have to ask
I've read
ourselves.
all of your books. You are now my #1 mystery.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so
You
much.
surpassed Jussi Adler-Olsen.
we like it more.
Do either of you have any Finnish ancestry? Because you make some references to a wedding crown, and I didn't know if.
No, not in our families, but Sweden's history is so close to Finland's history. And when I was a child, my closest friends, it was a Finnish family. So, yeah.
But we actually did this DNA thing with the kids.
Yeah.
So we have Finnish background.
Yeah, on your side,
Yeah.
there is a bit Finnish.
You mentioned at the start that you've written 6 books. I read 5 of them, including The Stalker, which I guess isn't available here. When is number 6 going to be available in English? And are you going to write more Una Linna stories?
Yes, we are. We have just finished the 7th,
yeah.
so we just left it before we went here to the US.
Yeah, actually,
But
the
the-
day before we left Stockholm, we finished it and we gave it to our middle daughter because nowadays she's our first reader.
But The Rabbit Hunter, that is the latest book that has been published. And I don't know, do you know when it's going to be in English?
In UK this summer, I think, and here in the US next spring.
Okay, thank you.
So are there
So
any?
what are, it's the Hypnotist, the
The
Nightmare,
Nightmare,
Fire Witness,
and
The Sandman,
okay, I read those 4. And then what's the
Stalker.
5th?
Stalker,
And that's
and then
available here in the US?
No.
yeah.
So I read it maybe okay, so Stalker and then Rabbit Hunter.
Yeah.
Okay, very
The
good.
United States is publishing is a little bit behind. Sometimes that Scandinavian authors come out in England first, Camilla Lackberg. Some of you may have read Camilla's books. She was here some years ago. We had actually a fascinating discussion with her about translations. And it turned out that I had a classmate from Stanford who was the translator. And he came over here, lives in New Mexico, and came over because he wanted to meet Camilla and talk to her because he hadn't, and then I think his wife took over. So I don't know who your new translator is.
It's Neil Smith.
He's not somebody that I know.
No,
Yeah.
he lives in England. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, the translation has an awful lot to do with how much English-speaking people enjoy the books because, there's a lot of variation. And capturing the idioms is the hard part. I was a French major, and I can still remember reading Cyrano de Bergerac in French and then reading it in English, and it was almost like two different works in lots of ways, because so many of the idioms don't translate.
Were you happy with the translations of the first 3 books?
Yes, we were. But then we are really happy now with Neil Smith because we can feel that he is so close to our original books. And also the editing, we have been so involved with it now.
With Knopf, it's been great actually, so we're really happy with this.
It's very interesting to have them retranslated. I mean, I've seen books republished, but rarely have I seen books retranslated. But if you're going to do the whole story arc and go on, then having that one singular voice certainly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous expense for a publisher to undertake the translations. And I can tell you from that one discussion that I had, that translators in general are paid by the word. It's a different whole royalty system than is involved for the author, because the translator for the Stieg Larssons was somebody I talked to, and I said, well, you must have gotten really rich, right? Stieg Larsson, no, it was that's what they got, was the original fee. So, but it is a major undertaking for a publisher to hire a translator and go through all of that. So it's not to be undertaken.
Do you choose the translator, or is it the publisher who chooses the translator? And what's your input? How do you determine whether?
Okay, it's a publishing house that decides, but it's really important to have this communication with the translator, and it's of course a lot easier when it comes to English because we're published in like 60 countries, and most of the languages we can't read at all. So then we must have this communication, discussions. So we're mailing with all our translators a lot.
Is there an audiobook version as well? You reminded me of that, because publishers also choose the audiobook readers, the authors now. Do you know if the books are going to be redone as audiobooks?
I don't know. I'm
It's a really interesting thought, because people like audiobooks so much.
Yes.
I'll try to find out.
This one is available on audio.
It is.
Really?
Yeah.
But I meant, were they going to go back, and do the other ones as audiobooks?
Will
would
the
be-
translation in the UK be different than what we get in the US?
Yeah, because they are adjusting it for the American ear, and they are also editing it in another way.
There's a whole lot of words difference. For example, in England it's a tap, and here it's a faucet. And,
Yes.
and there's a lot of feeling about Americans will be confused by the English terminology and vice versa. We went through that with J.K. Rowling, and actually we made an absolute fortune as a bookstore off the fact that we had lots of customers who didn't want to read the American translation of the British, and so we imported the books from England so that people could read them in the original language. And I suspect that Knopf is going to want an American translation because of these differences, and there are idiomatic differences too between British English and English. So here we are.
That just raises an interesting question. You're 2 translators. You said you're happy with the first one. You're happy with the second one. Are they relatively the same?
No, I don't think so. I think they are. I think maybe the editing has been very different too. We feel that the new translator, we have been working very close with him, and we feel that he is exactly as Lars
Yeah,
Kepler in
he's
a
more
way.
exact in his wordings and all that. So
Because when you get your books translated, what you fear is that the translator will make everything a bit more general,
yeah, little
unspecific,
lame,
if
yeah.
you understand, and not as sharp as the original. Yeah.
No, a thought that comes to me, how are you, I don't know if you experienced that, but let's say, for example, your book were turned into a movie. How are you as writers, does it take away a lot of the delicate things and the details, or is it just taking away the whole story? Because I for me it's like that, I see that as a typical movie. I mean,
Movies, it's a totally different thing, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
it takes away this delicate story kind of, right?
Yeah. As a
But I
reader,
think
you
with
often think
Harry
that,
Potter, they made the movies
Right.
very close to the
Oh, they
books,
did.
and that was, I think, the success of those.
movies,
So of
yeah.
course we would love that
But
the movies
it's
were
a
close.
very different medium.
Yeah.
A movie, it doesn't allow for the interior dialogue and all of the nuance. You know, I recently edited a book by a scriptwriter who's trying to write a novel, and his novel was too much like a script. You know, it didn't have, because he was used to actors or walking onto the set and you could see. So in the book, he didn't describe things, or you know, it was really interesting. It clarified for me the differences. There are very few authors write scripts for their own books.
Yeah.
Would you do that?
No.
No,
Okay.
no, we write books.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we
It's-
do.
it's
We
different.
are not script writers.
So
But
for
you
you
are-
to look at it, that the end product would take away from the story. That's what I would. No,
It's just a different.
different.
It's
different-
different,
Yeah.
different way of
It's
telling
like
it.
an
Back
iceberg.
accepted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like cousins or something. I don't know.
But you do have some film, movie, TV news, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
So
exactly.
After today, tomorrow we're going to Hollywood to meet our
That's
producers.
what I thought.
Yeah. So it's Paramount and
Steve
anonymous
Golden.
content, and they're doing both the TV series and film franchise. So it's a big project.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
I think serial television often today is doing a better job with books because they have more room to tell the
Right.
story. It doesn't have to be so compressed. When David Lagerkrantz was here last July, poor David Lagerkrantz, it was like 118. I thought when I brought him outside, you know, from the hotel he was staying in, he would just collapse in a puddle there on the tarmac. It was, you know, it was traumatic for him. But he was also going to be going to Hollywood, you know, because they're doing another Stieg Larsson movie. And he said more or less the same things, you know, that we're all saying here. I think as authors, you just have to let your books go and recognize that the movie is a different. But the good news is that you'll sell a lot more books if you have a movie or television.
If the movie's good,
Well,
hopefully.
sometimes even if it's bad, you know, it still gets people interested. There are a lot more people that watch things than read things today.
They did good with Stieg Larsson's books, the woman with the dragon tattoo. It told that story pretty good, I think.
Swedish adaptations were
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Those movies.
Exactly. I've heard that the Swedish movies were superior to the, you know, American ones.
So are they going to do the whole series with all the books, or just in the movie, or just a movie of one book? Or?
No, they have this interesting idea, Alexander.
To in some ways separate the universes. So for the TV series, they will concentrate on the hypnotist, the character Eric Maria Bark, and the stories he's in. And for the film franchise, they will concentrate on Jonah Lynn and Saga Power. And I think they will start with the Sandman.
So that is very interesting. So they will have the hypnotist from the hypnotist and from Stalker
And the idea is
do a
that
TV series.
in
So
some
it's-
way, the universes will
Right.
go
touch
in-
each other.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's a very big
Right.
plan. So we don't know. We just hope it will.
Who do you envision playing your characters?
Oh, that is daydreaming.
They don't have any voice in that either. It just has to be the
No,
film
no,
studio.
no.
I can certainly see why they'd want to make the movie of the Sandman, because the marketing opportunities to link it to the, you know, to Silence of the Lambs would be so high. Did you have a question back there, sir?
Yes, and I apologize for coming in late. But I have a two-part question, if you don't mind, and if you haven't already answered them. What is your daily writing regimen like? Are you very well self-disciplined? Do you write so many pages per day, or so many words, or so many hours? What is it like? And your writing schedule. And my second question is, up until the time you struck it successful with your first publication, did you struggle financially?
That's a little personal, I think, to answer, but the first question was very good.
From a writer's point of view, perspective, not personal, but I mean, was it difficult to get your first successful publication?
Yeah, well, I have to answer that question because it's really a good story. Alexander, he wrote his first novel when he was 18 years old, and he was so poor that he couldn't afford to make photocopies of his manuscript, the original manuscript. He typewrote. There were no computers back then, and so you sent in the original manuscript, the one and only manuscript, to the publishing house.
With typics and glued in parts and all that.
Yeah, and they accepted it. So, but yes, we were writers before we wrote Lars Kepler, and I worked as a critic, and I was teaching literature at the university. I had all these, jobs to make it because we couldn't live well on our books before. It was, very literary books in a totally different genre.
So the big difference actually with the success is that we can totally write full time, which is a dream for a writer.
Yeah.
And
that is the big salary that we actually can live on our dream.
That is connected to the first question, because we write every day, at least I write up till 10 hours a day.
Alexander shaves in front of the computer. He never leaves the computer.
Saturdays and Sundays and Christmas, I can't stop because it's so enjoyable, and it continues in my head, and I just have to sit down in front of the computer and write because.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
We have time for one more. Anybody?
You were describing the way you work, and I just want to see if I understand this. You kind of storyboard the whole thing before you ever start to write that first scene, or so there's a period when you're not writing 10 hours a day. I mean,
just talking.
And talking. So we're dreaming.
Right, and before pencil or fingers start typing, you've got the whole thing.
We write notes then,
more or less. I mean, you might move things around.
Yeah, because these stories have to be logic in a way, and they have to have their turning points, and circles have to be
complicated.
closed.
So sometimes you have to pick out just one line of the story and write it for several months. One character, and just follow that story, and then you go back to the main story again. So it's.
What you're trying to say is it's an obsessive activity. You're both addicted to it.
Yeah, so I think you need to be kind of obsessive.
Yeah, but it's wonderful that you have this dynamic together. Can you envision doing investigative journalism with your wife?
No.
My husband runs the publishing company. I run the bookstore. So, I congratulate you. We've managed to keep it separate. I want to thank our Facebook audience for joining us tonight, and we hope that you have enjoyed the discussion. And I hope that you will all give our authors a round of applause. And we will give Robert a round of applause because he's a wonderful resource and a wonderful advocate for authors.